Welcome to Law Days and Lattes, the podcast where we blend the world of law and business with a warm cup of information and common sense. I'm your host, Sydney Whelan, attorney, real estate investor, and business owner. Each week, we'll be your go-to source for legal insights, business advice, and so much more. Whether you're a seasoned professional, an ambitious entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking guidance, we'll have you covered. From navigating the legal landscape to empowering you with valuable business strategies, we'll explore the legal side of life and enjoy a virtual latte along the way. So, grab your favorite latte, get comfortable, and let's dive into Law Days and Lattes. Welcome back to Law Days and Lattes, your go-to podcast for legal insights over your favorite cup of coffee. I'm Sydney Whelan, your host and founder of the Whelan Law Firm in Moberly, Missouri. I'm here to help you navigate the legal side of life with confidence. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects millions of people, but isn't talked about enough: cohabitation. Whether you're moving in with a partner, already living together, or just curious about the legal risks, this episode is for you. Grab your latte and let's get into it. Let's talk about the legal illusion of common law marriage. For all reasons people decide to get married, there are many reasons that other folks choose not to tie the knot with their partners. From the very young who think they are not yet ready for marriage, to the older adults who have been married and have decided for various reasons that marriage may not be for them, at least right now. Let's start with a major myth: the idea that living together for a certain number of years makes you common law married. Reality check: most states do not recognize common law marriage. Missouri, where we are, is one of the states that do not recognize the common law marriage. Even in states that do, it's not automatic. You have to meet specific legal requirements. If you break up, you have zero legal protections unless you've taken proactive steps. A case example: a client of mine, let's call her Sarah, lived with her partner for 8 years. They shared a home, bills, and even referred to each other as husband and wife. When they split, Sarah was shocked to learn that she had no legal claim to the house because it was titled only in his name. If they had been legally married, she probably would have had a claim to a fair division of assets. But because they were just cohabitating, she walked away with nothing. So the key takeaway here is if you are living with someone, the law doesn't protect you like marriage would. You need to put your own legal safeguards in place. In this episode, we'll talk about some of those safeguards that you might want to consider before moving in with another person. Let's talk about the risks you didn't see coming. Many couples move in together thinking it's a step toward marriage or a practical financial decision. But here's what no one tells you. First, you could lose financially in a breakup. If one partner owns the home or the car or any other titled asset, the other has no automatic right to equity. If you split and your name isn't on the lease or the deed or the title, you could be left homeless overnight, regardless of how many payments you have personally made on those assets. The legal fix? Consider a cohabitation agreement that outlines who owns what and how assets will be divided if you break up. Or take other measures, like making sure both partners are titled owners of major assets if you are buying something together. Next, remember that you have no legal rights if your partner gets sick or passes away. Without a healthcare power of attorney, you have no legal right to make medical decisions, and your partner can't make medical decisions for you either. Without a business power of attorney, you will not be able to access the other's bank accounts or assist with business affairs of your partner or your significant other. If your partner dies without a will or other estate plans, their assets go to their legal next of kin. That's not you. I've had more than one client who was unintentionally left without a home when their partner passed away. The partner's adult children took possession of the real estate and the contents of the home and took measures to have the surviving partner evicted from the property. This particular situation wasn't because they had just moved in together and hadn't had a chance to document their situation with written agreements or change the deeds. This couple had been living together for more than 10 years and had planned to spend the next 20 or 30 years together. They just didn't think that they needed the documentation. So the fix is to get an estate plan in place so that this type of unintended circumstance doesn't happen to you. Next, let's talk about debt and credit issues. Debt and credit issues can become your problem. If you co-sign loans or open joint credit accounts, you are 100% responsible for that debt if your partner stops paying. Even if you just share bills informally, late payments could wreck your credit. So the lesson is to keep finances separate unless you have a clear written agreement on how shared expenses are handled. Let's talk about how you can protect yourself legally. So how do you do that if you choose to cohabitate? Here are 3 legal must-haves. First is the Cohabitation Agreement. Think of it as a relationship contract. It outlines who owns what, how finances will be handled, and what happens to shared property if you break up. Think of it as a property agreement or a prenuptial agreement, with or without a plan to marry in the future. Next, you need an estate plan. If you want your partner to inherit anything, you must have a will or other estate planning documents in place. Otherwise, the law and the state where you live decides who will receive your assets, and it will not go to your unmarried partner. 3, if you want legal authority over medical or financial matters in an emergency, you must have durable powers of attorney in place for business and healthcare matters. What about other financial and liability issues? Living with another individual without the legal protections of marriage often affects other areas of your life as well, things that you may not really think about. Let's talk about insurance matters. Take automobile insurance coverage, for instance. Recently, a friend of mine, let's call him Roger, was involved in a motor vehicle collision while he was driving a vehicle owned by his significant other, Ruth. Although Roger was uninjured, the other driver suffered severe injuries. Roger thinks he is covered under Ruth's automobile liability coverage, and she has a $1 million umbrella policy. So he should be okay, right? Well, not so fast. Remember, Roger and Ruth are not married. Ruth was not driving and in most scenarios could not be held liable for Roger's actions. Ruth's automobile insurance policy probably covers Roger while he was operating her vehicle, but only up to the minimum liability limits of Ruth's automobile insurance policy. Most automobile insurance policies have a step-down coverage for drivers who are not the owners of the automobile. What does that mean? That means that the insurance company will likely not pay maximum liability limits to anyone other than the legal owner of the vehicle. So, what are the minimum liability limits of your state? In Missouri, the minimum liability limits of coverage for a driver is only $25,000 per person. Even though Ruth might be insured for over $1 million if she were driving, that is certainly not the case for Roger when he is operating her car. Roger will very likely only have $25,000 liability coverage for this collision. The sad truth? Not understanding the dynamics of automobile insurance coverage could unknowingly put his assets at risk. So, how could Roger fix this situation next time? He could only drive his own vehicle, so he could have control over his insurance coverage. Or he and Ruth could discuss their automobile coverage situation with a reputable insurance agent or an attorney familiar with insurance matters. One solution for Roger and Ruth is to add each other as, quote, additional insureds, close quote, on all vehicles owned by the other. The cost is minimal, but could prevent financial disaster in the event there is a serious injury to another individual. So, some closing thoughts. Living with someone outside of marriage isn't just about romance. It's a financial and legal arrangement, whether you realize it or not. The law won't protect you unless you take actions to protect yourself. So, if you're living with a partner or thinking about it, now is the time to put legal safeguards in place. Talk to your partner about some of these issues. How are you going to handle joint purchases of both small and large ticket items? Who is going to pay for what expenses going forward? How will the two of you determine how property will be divided if you later choose to go your separate ways? Remember, if you are married, you have certain rights regarding marital property. You have no such legal protections if you are not married. Talk to an attorney about a cohabitation agreement. Even if this is a long-term relationship, life happens sometimes. Having an agreement in writing makes sense and often prevents legal disputes down the road. Make sure you have an estate plan in place. Even if the two of you are in agreement, surviving heirs and family members may have different ideas. Don't assume you have legal rights just because you've lived together for years. Protect yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Have you ever faced legal issues related to living with someone? Drop a comment on our social media pages or send in your questions for a future episode. That's it for today's episode of Lattes and Lattes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time with more legal tips to help you protect your financial future. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe to Lattes and Lattes for more legal insights. Have a topic you'd like me to cover? Send me a message. Be sure to like and follow this podcast so that you don't miss a single episode. And also, be sure to share it with your friends and family so that they too can benefit from this information. Until next time, my friends, grab your favorite cup of coffee, stay informed, hold your loved ones tight, and have a great week.
This podcast episode contains general information for discussion purposes only. Each case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Missouri rules generally prohibit lawyers from advertising that they specialize in particular areas of the law. This show should not be construed to suggest such specialization. Nothing on this show should be taken as legal advice for any individual case or situation. This information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship, and the listening or viewing of this podcast does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.